Hello, Doomloopers, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the news show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. We are on the edges of our seats, so excited to have the guest today. Seriously, it's the biggest get we've been hoping for. The Honorable Pamela Price, our former Alameda County District Attorney, and an attorney with decades of experience, who's actually argued in front of the Supreme Court. And now she's a podcaster just like us. So we're going to have so much to talk about today. But first off, Pamela, it is an honor to have you on.
So much of an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you.
We're only trying to do what we can. But my first question, I want to talk about something that just happened in the news. We got to talk about this weird enhancement bit that just happened in court, where basically you were accused by a public defender, Jenny Otis, of adding a gun enhancement on a shooting, just because she said you asked her for her support during the recall, and she said declined, and so she accuses you of adding this enhancement. And Judge Thomas Reardon, a guy who's been in Oakland for a long time, he actually shot it down. Now, I would love to get your side of this, because it's a gun enhancement. I mean, it makes sense. There is probably other enhancements that could have been added, but this one makes sense because the dude shot a guy in the back.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just a shooting. And let's be clear. And I think that's my biggest concern about this. And I'll talk about enhancements on Pamela Price Unfiltered. A couple of things, though. This case, the case of Miles Armstead, who was the victim, he was shot 5 times, and he was shot in the back. And as he lay on the ground, he was shot 3 more times by this defendant. So this wasn't just any shooting. This was a brutal, brutal murder. And I just really, as I watched this whole drama unfold that was triggered by Miss Otis in a desperate ploy to try to reduce the sentence of her client, I thought the victims got lost in this. The facts really got lost in it. Because a man was brutally murdered in a neighborhood in front of children and neighbors and people. And that gentleman was on, the defendant, Miss Otis's client, was actually on probation when he committed this murder. Wow. And he was on probation because he was given probation under the leadership of Nancy O'Malley and her administration. And yet, how ironic that this was a person who had been convicted of a crime of harassing this family, then went through the judicial process, was released on probation, and then went out and killed someone. And yet we never heard the kind of uproar that I'm sure would have happened on my watch back in 2020 when this happened. So there was a lot about that case that just got buried in the political drive to try to make me the villain. And it really was a real disservice and real disrespectful to the family. Mr. Thomas was convicted of murdering Miles Armstead in July of last year. And it took from then until now for Judge Reardon to make a decision about sentencing. So I think that's a real travesty of justice that got lost in the shuffle. The other piece about it, about enhancements, our community desperately needs education about enhancements. And that's one of the things that I hope to do on Pamela Price Unfiltered. We're going to talk about enhancements. Enhancements has become a bad word in our community, but the people, no one ever got the real education about enhancements. Like you point out, Kevin, there are lots of enhancements, literally dozens of potential enhancements on serious felony crimes. Most of the cases prosecuted by the Alameda County DA's office are misdemeanors. So enhancements don't even come into play. They only come into play where you have serious crimes like that involve domestic violence, serious injuries, violent crimes, And so there's a whole jurisprudence around enhancements. In the case of Miles Armstead, in 2020, there were 4 enhancements that were added to the charges when Mr. Thomas was charged. And so those enhancements have been there the whole time. Ms. Otis represented to the court that, oh, she just found out about the enhancements. That's not true. The enhancements were on the complaint when it was filed in 2020. The enhancements have been there all the time. And there were numerous enhancements. My deputies recommended the most serious enhancement, 25 years to life. And understand, an enhancement is something that gets added on top of the penalty. So if you kill someone and you're convicted of first-degree murder, the sentence is 25 years to life. And that means it's a life sentence. It's not 25 years and you get out of jail free. That's not how it works. It's a life sentence. It means after 25 years, you may be eligible for parole, you may not. But the sentence is a life sentence. And when you go to the parole board, they are looking at the life sentence. And then on top of that, you can add, for gun charges, there are a number of enhancements where a gun is used. And so Mr. Thomas, Ms. Otis's client, was facing 50 years to life for most of the past 5 years, really, since 2020, since when he committed this crime. In 2024, I approved a recommendation to add an enhancement that was not 25 years to life, that was not 20 years to life, which was one of the options, that was either 3, 4, or 10 years to life. That's what I approved. And, the court took exception to that, but really it was the judge's job to impose the enhancement. Once we picked one and the case went to trial and he was convicted of one, then the court should have imposed the enhancement. That's my view. The failure to do so, I think, is just purely political.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. It's okay if O'Malley does it, but not if Price does it.
Right. The other false narrative around that is that it was rare for us to impose enhancement. That is such a misstatement of what was actually happening. We adopted a policy to ensure accountability and fairness in the process. It does not mean that we did not use enhancements. In fact, most of the time when we were asked to use enhancements, we picked one. We might not have picked the most harshest one, but we did use gun enhancements actually quite regularly. So there's a lot of misinformation, both about that case and generally about enhancements, that I will have to address. I will get the opportunity to address on Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Right on. Yeah. So as far as like you say, the misinformation, because there's a lot of things that as a layman, I just don't understand about the legal process, right? So it's really hard to be able to differentiate. Where do you think the misinformation is mostly coming from?
Well, clearly it started when we got elected. People were upset. We upset the apple cart in 2022. If you look back at the race that we ran in the election, the entire Democratic Party establishment was aligned behind my opponent. Within the office, they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to support my opponent. He had all the endorsements, and folks were, expecting. When I got there, I heard from other department heads that all they heard about before we got there was my opponent, that he was going to be the new DA. And so it was shocking to people that we defeated the machine and we upset the status quo, and we walked into an office that had not seen change in 50 years. And so the misinformation immediately started. And, as a Black person coming into that office, the racism in that office was so inbred and ingrained. And I brought a team largely composed of Black and brown people. And they had never seen that many Black people in a leadership position in that office who were not defendants, right? So the expectation was that we were going to be defendants at some point, and we were treated like that.
Wow, the expectations that we were going to be defendants at some point.
Yes.
Wow, that is a statement. I mean, hell, wow.
Oh my God.
But
And as someone who practiced law, who's been, I haven't had any problems in the law working as a lawyer in this community. And suddenly, once I became the DA, then there was something criminal and unethical when I became dangerous. All of that started within the first 30 days after I took office.
Yeah.
And that's a misinformation campaign.
Yeah, and even the recall, I swear, was like the week you won. They're like, well, we got to get this recall going. And it's like, she hasn't even had a chance. Like, she hasn't even stepped in the office and they're talking about this.
Right.
I mean, now we know the carceral system. We know about police unions, but we also, too, you have a lot of real estate interests getting involved with these recalls. Who do you really think was behind this stuff? Who was really the ones out to get you?
Well, obviously, someone named Philip Dreyfus spent about $5 million to pay for. It cost $3 million to get the signatures. And that was, the tipping point. Once you get signatures and you get enough signatures to put a recall on the ballot, then the likelihood is that the official who's been targeted is going to be recalled, because for a lot of reasons, one of which is that there's no choice around who should have the position. So it's hard when you're running against a phantom. People are just making allegations about you, true or not, but they're making the allegations, and the voters don't know what's true, what's false, and there's no real competition. It's just targeting that individual. So it's not a mystery. Philip Dreyfus
but I think
started paying for all of this. Yeah.
To Kevin's point, though, I mean, like, what do you think that Philip Dreyfus actually gained from the recall effort?
I have no idea. Philip Dreyfus, I'm told, was at the reception for the new DA. So, maybe there's something one would have to ask him. What does he get now that he's bought the seat for another person? I have no idea.
Well, because
I don't know him.
The other thing that mystified me was that Swalwell actually came out. Eric Swalwell came out against you. And I'm trying to figure out, what did he have to gain from that effort? I mean, because did you ever work with the guy? Do you know him at all? I mean, what exactly do you think he was? What was his investment?
Eric Swalwell, you said it correctly. Eric Swalwell invested $80,000 in Terry Wiley's campaign.
Oh.
Well, were they former coworkers? Because he used to be on staff, right?
I'm not sure if he worked with Terry Wiley, but he was mentored by Nancy O'Malley, and he literally maxed out in the primary with a $40,000 contribution, and then he maxed out in the general with another $40,000 contribution. If I put up $80,000 and my candidate lost, I would kind of have a little burn for the person who won.
Right. That makes more sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also too, there was the whole thing about the anti-Semitic jury pools and stuff, and jury choosing and selection. That's the word I'm looking for. And I mean, that was about when he was in the office. I mean, I don't know if you're able to connect these people to it. But it seemed like, especially your pursuit of justice with that, really shook the system.
Absolutely. Us uncovering the practices, the unconstitutional, unethical practices of prosecutors, literally for a 30-year period, caught a lot of people by surprise and upset a lot of folks who are, having their say. Judge Reardon is one who was part of the office during that time frame. And that was one of the things that we had to consider. We had to look not only at the lawyers that we were able to identify who were clearly part of it and for whom we had notes, but we also know that was part of the culture in the office. When you look at the racial statistics of this office historically, you see that we have, as Jeff Adachi pointed out for San Francisco, we have a race problem in Alameda County, and we've had one for a very long time. And so the death penalty cases represented the tip of the iceberg, because not only could you can't stop with just identifying the people whose notes you have to know that they engaged other people, that they trained and mentored other generations of lawyers who came through that office during that time when that practice was normalized. And people are not, I recognize when we exposed it, that, there are a lot of folks that were not going to be happy. I mean, one of the things I was concerned about, this is a legacy office. And I knew that there were many deputies in my office whose parents worked in the office during that time, who came through the office, who were, potentially implicated in all of this. I mean, there was no direct line, but we knew that there was a culture that really supported that kind of practice, and particularly what appeared to be a cover-up once Jack Quatman, the deputy DA who blew the whistle in 2005, the way that the office circled the wagons around him, it made it appear that there were a lot of people that were invested in this behavior. And so, we anticipated there would be retaliation. We didn't know what direction it came from. Certainly, Eric Swalwell's position is incredibly untenable. And his engagement is something that's going to be dealt with within the Democratic Party.
And I think that was the thing that I thought immediately after I saw this really full on campaign from him directly at you. I was like, is he implicated in this? I mean, because like I say, I'm an outsider, I'm a layman. Do you think that Dickinson's going to continue that pursuit, or is she going to drop it?
I'm not sure. I mean, we were able to go through most of the cases. I'm told that she stopped the resentencing process literally the day that she got there. Macy, we have a docket of resentencing cases. Some of them are associated with the death penalty. Some of them are mandated by law. And so apparently the docket was stopped or she wanted to stop the docket. My understanding is most of the death penalty cases that we were dealing with have already been resolved. We worked with lightning speed because we were under, the mandate of Judge Vincent Chambria, who said, we are going to get to the bottom of this. And I joined him in that effort.
Right on. Yeah. Right on. With that, that's something that brings me a little bit of calm. I appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But then also too, there was a hearing today about your resentencing requests. Yeah. And that's been delayed too. Thankfully, that's apparently the judge is going to look it over and wait until April to make a decision. But I mean, I saw some of this resentencing requests you made. I saw one where it was literally, you were just the guy was sentenced 50 to life. And you just wanted to, because he got 3 strikes, and it was all burglaries. That's a thing. He was a drug addict, and they were all burglaries. No one getting harmed, just property theft. And he got 3 strikes, and you literally, all you were requesting is just taking it down from 50 to 25. And Dixon even wanted to throw that out.
Yeah. Well, the law has changed since DA Dixon was a DA, and there's some mandatory resentencings that will have to happen. And our goal was to streamline the process, expedite it, manage it. The Racial Justice Act plays a role in that. And if you don't, you have to be aware of how that impacts any of these cases. And if people have legitimate Racial Justice Act claims, which they may have based on the past practices that we see in Alameda County, you have to be ready to address that.
Yeah.
And it's about fairness. The legislature has mandated that certain sentences be reformed, and that's just a process. Our initiative was not only to do it in a manner that was fair and efficient and to create standards for it, but also in being a good steward for the residents of Alameda County, because my position was, if we are going to resentence people and bring them home under any circumstances, or create a pathway for them to come home, it needs to be something that we are confident that they're going to come home and become good citizens, that they are not going to come home and go back to the life that they left, or recidivate within 3 years, which is the standard in California. The average person commits another crime within 3 years and goes back to prison. We don't want that for Alameda County residents or families. If we are mandated, or if it's fair to bring someone home, we created a reentry process. We had a reentry team as part of the resentencing, as well as a reentry commission, so that we can make sure that we are protecting public safety. And we took that very seriously. And I certainly hope that that will continue to be the case in the new administration.
Yeah, and it's so important too to realize that when you're sentenced to life, I mean, you're in there for a very long time. And guess by the time you're 60, you're 70, you can't do crimes anymore. Especially, I mean, if you were put in for a violent crime, you're probably like not that violent anymore. Or in this, in cases where it's 3 burglaries, you're probably addicted to drugs and trying to serve that addiction. Guess what? You've been in for 40 years now, even 20, 25 years, and you're over that stuff and you're not going to hurt anybody,
Well, we know that people do age out of crime. Some people age out at 30 years, some at 40 years, some at 50. Certainly by 60 or 70, people have aged out of crime. The challenge is that our system in the past has been punitive. And even though, I've been involved in criminal justice work since the 1980s, really, and really early 90s. I sued CDCR, my first case, in 1991. And somewhere along the way, they changed the name to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And so the focus shifted, allegedly, to rehabilitation, which meant that keeping people incarcerated on principle for 40, 50 years, unless they are a real danger to public safety, was not something that the taxpayers and the residents and the voting public of California wanted anymore. So the shift, when you add in "and rehabilitation" to the title of your agency, the presumption is at some point you are working to rehabilitate people, even if they have a life sentence, because then the legislature changed the law so that you have the youthful offender laws now that make people eligible for parole. And you have the elder offender laws that make elders eligible for parole. Now, everybody, this is the other misnomer. People who are eligible for parole that have a life sentence normally don't get parole. The data shows that less than 15% of the people who go to the parole board with a life sentence actually get parole the first time. That means 85% of the people who do actually get to go to parole, they're not going to get out. And then they got to wait 3 to 5 years before they can go back. And depending on the facts of the case and the crime and their conduct while they've been incarcerated over, 20, 30 years, they're not going to get out. And that's just the reality of it that is not reflected in any of the conversations when we're talking about charging or sentencing or resentencing.
What's so crazy to me is like this, again, like I say, this is just so enlightening to me. You were just simply following the law.
Exactly.
The law changed, and the law actually said it's now rehabilitation. The law changed, and it's now about like making considerations for youth and seniors. And you were just simply following the law. Absolutely. So basically what happened was that people were taking advantage of the fact that people didn't understand the law.
Exactly. People did not know anything about enhancements. They don't know anything about the parole board or the youthful offender laws or the elder laws. People don't understand the black box of justice. And so we started, when I ran for this seat as the first person to run since 1972, that was an education process of first convincing our community that the district attorney is an elected official, right? People didn't even know it was an elected official. They certainly didn't know what the DA did. So we had to educate people. This is what a DA does. This is why the reason why you don't see them on your ballot and you've never voted for a DA is because nobody's ever run for this seat. The whole time I was in California, I came here in 1978. I never voted for a DA, right? Most people, my generation and older and younger, they never voted for a DA because no one ever ran. So our first task was to educate people about the role of the DA. But there was so much ignorance about the law when I came into office in 2023 and how the laws had changed and what our mandates were, that yes, people were able to be hoodwinked about what we were doing as if we were doing something extraordinary. One of the recent laws that people will find out about, the legislature has passed a law. It is required that victims be given the option of restorative justice. That's the law.
Yeah.
And, our community doesn't know that, and they're not ready for that. And they've been made to think restorative justice is a bad thing. Well, guess what? It's the law, people.
Yeah.
Wow. And so how did they turn restorative justice into a bugaboo? How did they turn it into this thing where people were like, well, I guess they did it with DEI too, I guess. So
It's narrative, it's media, it's misinformation. It's attacking people based on, their political ideology, but making it into something else. I mean, one of the things, I am an elected Democratic member of the Democratic Party. And one of the things that we know is that the Democratic Party is doing a terrible job of communicating what we believe and what we stand for. Wow. Whereas, and it's both that we've done a terrible job, and the folks that are reactionary MAGA folks that want to take us back to the 1940s and 50s, they've done a great job. And I mean, I recall when the Heritage Foundation and all of these extra think tanks, when they began the process of creating the narrative about, a progressive DA is bad, restorative justice is bad, soft on crime narrative. They brought that back from the 1970s. Yeah. So they've been very organized and effective at deceiving the public into thinking that these things are bad.
Just cheaper anyway. Lies are cheaper. They're easier to do, and they're cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's also too, also, I guess what gets me the most is the exploitation of the victims as well as what they're doing. I mean, that's what always kills me in seeing this is like, you're following the law, you're doing what you can. And I mean, of course, too, they're also exploiting the ignorance around what a DA does and thinking, oh, well, if she just did her job, all crime would stop. All these things wouldn't happen, and not taking into account what the law actually says. And, also, too, it's, I feel like what a victim needs isn't necessarily just punishing the defendant, it isn't just punishing the person at the center of it,
Yeah.
But what I'd like to know is that why, because Oakland is the most diverse, like, metropolitan area in the country. Why do you think that we had to deal with this white supremacist agenda in our courts? Like you would think because the population is so diverse that we wouldn't have this thing that's kind of like similar to something that's happening in Tennessee or similar to something that's happening in Mississippi. Why do you think this actually became the standard in our judicial system?
It has always been the standard in our judicial system, as long as I've been a lawyer and before. I don't know if either one of you have read The Writers Come Out at Night.
We both have.
Yeah. We even had Ali on, man.
Von Graham, great.
Writers Come Out at Night does an excellent job of chronicling the historical role that the district attorney's office has played in Alameda County from the Republican right-wing perspective. This office has always been run by Republicans. I mean, going back even Earl Warren. But you think about the days of Ed Meese, right, who we know was the most reactionary person. These were folks that were so right-wing and so created the legacy of this office. D. Lowell Jensen, he came back last week. His legacy of prosecuting the Black Panther Party over and over. Tom Orloff from Pleasanton, prosecuting, the Black Panther Party. So there's always been within Alameda County, it's bigger than Oakland. There's the yin and the yang. Yes, there's the progressive movements of Oakland and Berkeley, but there's always been the repressive Republican-based power structure that controlled the DA's office and set the agenda for the district attorney's office. So they've never lost power until 2023 was the first time that they were not in control of the agenda of that office.
So we're talking about twas ever thus. Twas ever thus. And so you came in and basically we got to put for me, because like you said, like nobody votes for DAs. For the first time in my life, I'm like, is Alameda County right wing? What the hell? Right. Yeah. But you're right. Alameda County, look, now you have me thinking about it in a larger frame. Alameda County is quite right wing.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the Nolans and the Oakland Tribune, all of that is documented, great deal. I give my hats off to the writers come out at night because it will open your eyes. Also, The Color of Law, another history of Alameda County. Yeah. We have a progressive facade because we had the Black Panther Party and the free speech movement, but the DA's office was all about repressing those movements. And that is, essentially the history of this office. And when we came in, I'll give you an example, and I can talk a lot about this on Pamela Price Unfiltered. But before we came in, this office has a long tradition of publishing a text on criminal law. And it's distributed around the state. It's usually online, we were told before we got there. Before I got there in December, what I was told that the person who was responsible for publishing this statewide guide that was used in all the district attorney's offices, he posted that this guide was no longer going to be made available because the criminals have taken over the Alameda County District Attorney's Office.
Oh my God.
How? What?
The environment I walked into. I was labeled a criminal before I got there.
Okay,
so they spent the next 2 years trying to make me into a criminal.
Well, can you tell me
what Black people are in our criminal justice system?
Kevin interviewed Ryan about maybe how long ago was that you interviewed Ryan?
Yeah, probably a few episodes ago. It's right before Chase Boudin.
Yeah, and it's like, but he actually, I was unfortunately unable to make that one. But I mean, he actually was talking about how you were being sabotaged within your own office.
Yes.
Oh, day one. Absolutely. Yeah. When you think about the prosecutors union raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, both through the union and through soliciting, we had list of lawyers who were regular donors to Terry Wiley's campaign. And they raised over $300,000 to support his campaign and keep us from being elected.
Oh. God, yeah. And how does that make you feel when you're trying to accomplish something? You're being sabotaged by your own staff. And why won't they even give you a shot too? Like, what do you think you were doing that was so offensive to them?
Exactly.
Yeah, we upset the apple cart. We changed the status quo. And in the words of one of my teammates, we actually T-boned. We literally T-boned the system. It was challenging. I was very, very lucky to have just an exceptional, extraordinary team of dedicated folks who came into that office with every desire to make it better and to serve the public. and they were extremely professional and able to do their job. I didn't have to micromanage them. They took their assignments and they ran with it. And so we had to literally learn everything about the office ourselves. There was no transition, there was no handoff for us. But my folks were up to the task. And so I was really, really blessed to have a great team. And that's what got me through. And I focused on the mission, which was to improve the office and improve the administration of justice for the residents of Alameda County. And I'm very, folks will tell you, I'm very focused. When I have a goal and a purpose, we're going to get it done. And so I'm also a workaholic. So I worked a whole lot of hours to get that done and was on mission and had other folks right there with me who were on mission. And so I told my team, give them grace. When you encounter someone who is hostile, just give them grace. And we, negotiated the best contract. My deputies are among the highest paid deputies in the Bay Area. We improved the physical plant. We brought the technology up to speed. I'm a big proponent of using technology and making that accessible for employees. And so we did a lot to try to benefit folks that really was apparently not appreciated because there was so much hostility. Even as we were after the election, I was getting, a lot of harassing and derogatory emails from people inside the office.
I can't believe that. That's insane.
Very unprofessional. Very unprofessional.
Unbelievable. I mean, oh my God. Well, and so on top of that too, how much do you think your desire to hold bad cops accountable played into the backlash against your win?
Well, absolutely. I think that when you see, 14 police unions saying we don't want a DA that's going to hold us accountable, that tells you the story.
Yeah.
And, again, when I ran, I made it very clear that I believe that the district attorney should have discretion and should be independent of the influence of police unions. I think all elected officials should not be beholden to police unions because there's too much that you have to do with respect to public safety that sometimes conflicts with the goals of the police unions. We know that their role traditionally has been to defend officers and misconduct and road cops. Look at Oakland. We got drunk drivers and, police shootings, and we're under a consent decree. I've been under a consent decree for how many years now? And, a lot of that is attributable to the police union. And they got a contract in Oakland under the former mayor, Libby Schaaf, under some very questionable circumstances.
Highly questionable.
They would not comply with the consent decree in the first 5 years. So a lot of the problems that you see in our justice system are not necessarily coming from the police agencies themselves, but it's the police unions that intimidate, the managers as well as the elected officials. And because I walked into that office very clear, I'm not intimidated. I'm not beholden. I didn't take your money. I don't want your endorsement. I'm here to do a job. That was something new for them because they have a long history, the unions do, of having a long history of contributing to the DA as, an elected person and actually being, having a lot of say-so about what the DA does. The DA for decades turned a blind eye to police misconduct. And we said we weren't going to do that. And so again, that upset the apple cart.
Yeah. And on top of that, so I was listening to your podcast, which is great, by the way. The first episode up now. Check it out. Yes. It's seriously, especially it's all about Trump's immigration plans.
And protecting the people. No, you're right. Yeah,
yes.
Everybody listen to it. Everybody.
Yeah, it's really great because it's very informative, especially when you start talking about kind of what the Bay Area is facing, what Alameda County is facing, and especially too the privatized prisons that could be used for putting and deporting immigrants. Now, I think privatized prisons and that system we really need to talk about too, because it seems a lot of the DA backlash came after basically the order to empty the prisons. Yet prisons were overflowing. Let's empty them out. It seems like a lot of this backlash is because people lost some income. How much do you think the money behind policing people, especially because it comes from tax? I mean, it's good money, it comes from taxes. How much is that motivating this backlash against progressive prosecutors like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, I was suing the Department of Corrections for almost 40 years, starting in 1991. And I can tell you the California Correctional Officers Peace Association, California Correctional Peace Officers Association, CCPOA, was one of the most active actors in the recall movement. And they are one of the best paid police associations in the country. Our prison guards make more money than most prison guards in the entire country. CCPOA is a huge force in the legislature and pushing the legislature not to oversee the conditions of prisons, to allow for the expansions of prisons. And even after we went through the realignment process, they still have an interest in making sure that we continue to over-incarcerate people. It is a financial gain for the unions to have more prisons, more people incarcerated, more employees, and more members. And we know that the police officer lobbies in California are very, very strong, and some of the largest police associations in the country. And they were very active in the recall behind the scenes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I kind of suspected as much, because what I didn't see was any, like the thing is, I expected to see a little bit of pushback, at least from, like, say, officers who were going to have to, like, deal with. I'm trying to make the connection, but I did expect to see officers on the ground supporting you more. Like what I thought was like, okay, there's going to be a faction of guys who just like look the other way, don't bother us. But there'd be another faction who was like, no, she's kind of trying to make it easier for us. And I never saw that, but I guess I never thought about it like that. I never thought about actual corrections officers are a problem too.
Yes.
One of the things that and I'll talk more about this on Pamela Price Unfiltered, is that what we now see in the Bay Area for the first time is a mass consolidation of all of the police unions that came together in connection with this recall. That was not like that before. You would have Fremont Peace Officers Association and Oakland Police Officers Association, and you might have, you didn't have CCPOA playing a big role in collaboration. I know that CCPOA was active in my election campaign, that they were funding some of the opposition. They opposed me being elected. But after I was elected, that triggered a mass movement to bring all of them together. And you saw that happen. Pretty much it got exposed in October. And something called the Peace Officers, PORAC, Peace Officers Research Association of California, the largest police union in the country, now has an active chapter and an office in Alameda County.
Yikes.
Because they can't have this happen again. Can't have another Pamela Price happen again.
Wow.
Oh my God.
You changed history, man.
Yeah. But how does it feel to know you were such a threat to the system? I mean, look how scared you make them,
Right. Yeah. I must be so powerful.
You are.
I'm learning how to walk in that I seem to be so powerful. I am a person that is not, I'm just somebody who's here to do the right thing. Right. And I thought about it as I I represented people, everyday people, for 40 years. And there was a sign in my office that said, don't be afraid to stand. It's on my wall. Stand up for what is right, even if you're standing alone. That was in my reception area. And I commended the people who had the courage to come to me when they had experienced some kind of wrongdoing at the job or in the world, whether we sued, Kmart for beating up customers or, challenging the Union City Police Department for when they allowed, the Latino gangs to attack young Black students on the way to school. I did a lot of challenging cases, suing Pelican Bay and CDCR, but I always respected people's courage. And I always told them, no matter, even if it's hard, it's better that you do the right thing, even if you're standing alone. And so I take it for granted that I'm going to do the right thing. And, there's a saying now that sometimes your very presence makes people uncomfortable. And I'm seeing that as I've grown more and more, in this life and along this journey, because I do have a lifetime of experience of standing up for what's right and, holding people accountable. And that scares a lot of people. And I don't really pay attention to it until you see the resistance. You're like, ooh, why is it so scared?
I'm a nice lady. What's going on?
Right, I'm just here to do my job. I'm telling you, in January 2023, I was like, what's wrong with these people? I just got elected. Why are they having such a fit here? And I watched them just spinning, and creating all of these lies and false narratives. And I'm like, what is wrong with them? But they were so afraid of the things that we were going to do. And I understand that people are afraid. When people come at you from day one, it's not what you've done, it's what they're afraid that you're going to do.
Yes, totally. And actually, and that leads me to kind of a bigger question now too, because you've been in law for so long, since the 80s. And I mean, on it, you've gone and you've argued cases like to the Supreme Court. I mean, that's the highest you can go. That is it. And now that, I mean, not only that SCOTUS has been captured by the right wing and basically from McCutcheon versus FEC, Citizens United, just everything you could think of is been opened up. And they're like, literally, I mean, I was just listening to a podcast about McCutcheon versus FEC, and in it, Thomas is talking about how, what's wrong with corruption? Like, what's wrong? Let's just let, everyone be able to pay as much as they can to help their candidates, because there's nothing wrong with somebody having more free speech than someone else. That's how things should work. And I mean, but the thing is that for the longest time, actually, the courts were that wall to stopping and protecting democracy. And I mean, because corruption is the end of democracy. Once you get that money in there involved, it's all downhill. And so even at our toppest levels, it seems like they're open to corruption, and we're going to see the end of democracy. But I don't know, being as long as you've been in this legal system and working with it, how are you feeling, especially for the courts to be able to protect our democracy?
Good question.
Yeah. Well, by the time I went to the Supreme Court in 2002, trust me, people were already being very, very concerned about the direction of the court. Thomas was there. I remember when Thurgood Marshall passed, we were literally in mourning and just absolutely shocked when Clarence Thomas got on there. It was just horrible, right? It was just like your worst nightmare that someone would take the position of the Honorable Thurgood Marshall, who of the nature of Clarence Thomas. And now, the subsequent revelations that have come out about his conflicts of interest, his lack of ethics, and all of that. I mean, we knew that in the 1980s, right? And in the 1990s, it was like, oh my God, look at what is happening. So by the time I got to the court in 2002, there already had been this shift. And, I remember when we went, many people assumed that we would lose. I represented Abner Morgan, a Black electrician, in a racial harassment case against Amtrak. And the worst kind of racism taking place at the Amtrak yard in Oakland. And we were basically making new law, and everyone assumed we were going to lose the case. That because the court was so bad, there were people who were saying, "Don't go to the court, just concede, do something, get away from the court." But we weren't able to do that. That wasn't the path that the Lord set me on, and so we went to the court. The morning Mr. Morgan and I left going to D.C., there was a headline that said, they're going to lose and it's going to set back the law. And we were like, okay, we're going and we're going to win. And we did. We won. And we created new law that helped millions of people. It's still helping millions of people who are subjected to discrimination of all sorts in the workplace. So the court has been not a friendly court for a very, very long time. And Citizens United certainly was another milestone in our downhill slide. I mean, and we are now way past Citizens United. We are living in a time where money is what dictates everything. You asked me about my situation. It's echoed. What is happening in Alameda County is just an echo of what's happening in our country. We're living in an oligarchy. They have taken control of the courts, of the Congress, of the executive branch. Major corporations are basically designing our lives. And it's almost like you think about it, it's like we're living in the Matrix, y'all.
Yeah, it's like that. But I gotta ask, because you're an expert. What the hell do we do?
Yeah. Serious.
We go back to basics.
Help me.
Well, we do what you are doing and what I'm going to do. We have to have independent media because corporate media is not going to tell people the facts. They're going to tell them what they want them to know. And so the explosion of podcasts is very important. We have to have a balance. The right wing has led the way in using this medium and has created such an influence on the mainstream medium. We have to have those who are willing to step into the arena and bring a different perspective. And that's going to be so important. And back to basics, we have to educate people so that they're not so easily fooled by foolishness that they see on Nextdoor or that they read in certain publications, that they actually know you better get the facts. We have to organize. We have to go back to organizing. People have to get active in their local organizations. They have to get active in politics, as dirty as it is. You got to hold politicians accountable. We have to hold the Democratic Party accountable. We have to hold people like Eric Swalwell accountable. When they take positions that are contrary to the interests of our community, we have to hold them accountable. And we can't be bullied. And that's, for me, I don't like bullies. No. So trying to bully me is not going to work out for you. And so I won't be bullied. I'm a Black woman who has practiced law. I graduated from Yale. I walked into an all-white world in 1974, and I learned early, you cannot bully me. Right. And here I stand, many, many years later, and I have a heart for people. I understand that we have to stick together. We have to stand for each other. And we have to stand up for what we think is right, even when you're standing alone.
That person's still in my spine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask the question, what the hell was going on with Emily Ragusa? It was so shrouded when it was happening. What was going on with that particular independent outlet?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wanted to talk to her editor, but I was told she didn't have one.
She doesn't. Yes. Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So I should say I used to be friends with her, honestly. But when I saw that first interview she did after she won with a staffer you fired, and he was, and basically it was exclusive. So even the SF Gate tried to get a hold of this guy, wouldn't do it, but somehow she got it. I knew right off the bat, you should not trust her. There was something there. And it made me so mad because we both went to Cal. We both went to the same J school. We both knew this was ethically wrong. What she was doing, ethically wrong. She was clearly not providing news. She was not being a journalist. She was being a propagandist. And it made me so angry.
So how did you feel on the ground when that was happening? Because
it was pretty obvious that there's propaganda and, the anonymous sources. And I can tell you, I want to clarify, we didn't fire any of the people that she highlighted. There were people who were under investigation that we were aware of. We had concerns about some of their ethical behavior. And so the way that the employment procedure worked under the contract with the lawyers was you had to convene an investigation. And so we put people on administrative leave, paid administrative leave, pending an investigation. They were not fired. Most of them, not most, about half of them ultimately resigned rather than participate in the investigation. And then, this issue of the anonymous people. And for me, I will say, I'm a lawyer who was one of I was the third most senior lawyer in that office when I got there. I'm not a baby lawyer. I'm not someone who doesn't know how to practice law or run a business. And so for me, watching people who were really, 15, 20 years junior to me, being able to have a say about how I was managing the office was quite interesting. I'm thinking, who are these people that they don't have as much experience as I do? Why are people even listening to them? Like, really, who are they?
Right.
That was interesting, but she certainly was, spending a lot of time amplifying these voices of these anonymous, as far as I didn't know they didn't seem, I certainly knew that they were not on my level. Let me just say that. And so when you see people who are not on your level talking smack about you, you have to say, you know what?
It's so funny because I was thinking the same thing while I was watching. I was like, why are all these little gnats buzzing around Pamela Price right now? These little gnats, you just gotta swat them away. You just gotta, but that eats up your time though too, right?
It didn't take my time because I didn't indulge it. It took the public's time. It caught the public off guard. Right. And it gave, this impression, oh my God, there's chaos. Oh my God, there's this. It alarmed the public. And that was a disservice to our justice system because we were not alarmed. We were about the business of creating a safe culture for people. We walked into an office that was toxic, that was traumatized. There had been 3 suicides in that office right before we got there. And so we really had to focus on health and wellness. The technology, they were not used to using technology before the pandemic, and they had a case management system that was antiquated and not at all adjusted to the work that they were doing. They didn't have training on. So there was so much work to be done internally that, we were focused on what we needed to do and watching, people in the public sphere just creating confusion and misleading the public.
3 suicides.
That's insane.
3 suicides and a heart attack of the finance director. And what I was told was that his family blamed my predecessor. And so it was the office was in really bad shape. And one of the things we did was to conduct a survey when we got there to ask the deputies and ask everybody, what do you need? What is your situation? Over and over again, it was staffing, it was training, it was health and wellness, and we amplified certainly aggressively amplified the resources for health and wellness. Because anytime you have 3 suicides, if you have a 4th one, you now have a suicide cluster.
Yes. Yes.
Cluster. And that was happening in the DA's office.
Oh my God. Oh my
So yeah,
God.
you're literally trying to save lives. You're trying to save lives.
You're trying to save lives. So whatever people are out there, spinning and doing their exit interviews with the media, that was not our concern.
Oh, man. God. Well, it just goes to again. I mean, this has been such an enlightening interview.
Yeah,
I mean, especially it's so great to get you as yourself into the media talking to us. You're a lovely person, Pamela. I gotta say. I mean, this has been wonderful.
Heroic. I mean, like I've admired you from afar, and I can honestly say that you have actually met every expectation I had during this interview. I can say that honestly, like I really appreciate what you've done, and I appreciate what you're planning to do in the future. I mean, like you really, you just really like you. I'm on your team.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we got to stick together. We have a lot. Alameda County has so much potential, and as I've focused in my first podcast, we are, we're the 4th most diverse county in the country. Yes. Which means we are ground zero for how we respond to being under siege in the Trump administration.
That's right.
So I'll be talking more about that on Pamela Price.
Yes. Honestly, people, sign up. It's on everywhere you get podcasts. Pamela Price Unfiltered. Subscribe now. It's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, and seriously, I mean, honestly, your message of solidarity, it's so important. I know, really. I mean, that's one thing we talk about all the time. Keep fighting the good fight. And truly, this energized me, like it's easy to look at the news and want to give up. But somebody who has gone through as much as you have this past year, and seeing you still standing there wanting to fight is truly inspiring.
Yeah, it's highly inspiring. I'd like to thank you, and like I would love for us to check in again, like in a couple after you get your podcast going on. We're gonna still be here. I would love to continue this conversation and tell the people what's going on with you, and tell the people what's going on with Alameda County from your perspective.
Yeah. Of course, for sure. I'm happy to come back. I mean, and I would just say, I want to be inspiring to my community. I want us to come through this. We survived the first Trump administration. We'll survive the second Trump administration. And, what someone said to me years ago after I had done a case that I really felt was really such a worthwhile case, and we lost. Because losing is part of winning, right? And he said to me, I was very despondent, and he said to me, "What if Thurgood Marshall had given up?" And that was like a wake up call. I said, I have no idea how many cases Thurgood Marshall lost before he won.
Yeah, people remember how much of a pillar that man was.
That's right.
Exactly. He was a pillar. Like every time you said his name, he's conjured up like this giant of a man, this pillar. Like Thurgood Marshall was a pillar.
And that is the resistance. What has pushed our country forward has been people who were willing not to give up.
That's right. That's right.
Ida B. Wells, that's one of my heroines. And what would Ida do? She would not give up.
Yeah, what would Ida do is a good question for everything.
Yeah.
What would Ida do? Yeah,
totally.
I won't be giving up anytime soon.
That's wonderful. And that's what we like to hear on the Doomloop Dispatch. This has been an amazing episode, Pamela. We'll link to your podcast. Everyone needs to subscribe. This has been fantastic. And also, too, people need to follow us on all the socials. We're on the X. We're on Blue Sky. Please, if you want to get off all the other stuff, join us on Blue Sky, TikTok, everything else. And please support our Patreon. We got bills to pay, and it always helps. And honestly, again, this has been wonderful, Pamela. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing in the late hours to be able to speak with us. And with that being said, Scott.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Always. All right, then. Thank you guys so much. Take care. Be well.